You're tired. Not the kind of tired that goes away after a good night of sleep. The kind that's already there when you open your eyes in the morning. The kind that follows you through the whole day, through the coffee, through the meetings, through the conversations, and is still sitting with you at midnight when you lie down and can't fall asleep. Maybe you've been snapping at people lately, and you're not sure why. Maybe you find yourself crying in the car for no reason you can name. Maybe you keep forgetting things you never used to forget. Simple things, obvious things, and it scares you a little. Maybe you feel like you're living slightly outside your own life, like you're watching it from a small distance, like you used to be more present, more like yourself. And maybe you've been telling yourself this is just life, that you're fine, that everyone feels this way, that you just need to push through. But here's what I want you to consider. What if this isn't just life? What if your brain has been quietly suffering in a slow, invisible, scientifically measurable way, and it has been trying to tell you in 10 very specific ways that it needs your attention? That's what this video is about. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through 10 signs that your mind is quietly suffering from chronic stress. Not the acute kind, not the kind that arrives with a clear event, a death, a crisis, an emergency. The chronic kind. The kind that builds so slowly, you stop noticing the accumulation.
The kind that comes from sustained pressure, from years of doing too much, feeling too little support, carrying too much responsibility, sleeping too little, processing too much, resting never, until the system that was built to handle occasional emergencies has been running emergency mode for so long, it doesn't remember what calm feels like. Each of these 10 signs has a neurological explanation. Each one is connected to what chronic stress actually does to specific structures in your brain, to your hippocampus, your amygdala, your prefrontal cortex, your nervous system, your immune system, your gut. Because this is not about character. It is not about willpower. It is not about being ungrateful for a good life or unable to cope with ordinary difficulty. This is about a biological system that has been operating above its sustainable threshold for too long. And at the end of this video, I want you to feel one thing above all. Not alarmed, not labeled, understood. Because what you're experiencing has a name, it has a cause, and there is a way through. If you're new here, welcome to Human Mind. Every week, we take the most fascinating and important questions about why you think, feel, and behave the way you do, and we answer them with science, with care, and with honesty. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, let's begin. Sign number 1, you can't fall asleep even when you're completely exhausted. Think about how this feels. The day has been long, your body is done, your eyelids are heavy, and your shoulders ache, and every part of you is asking for rest. You lie down, you close your eyes, and your brain turns on. Not dramatically, not with panic, just on. The mental inventory of the day starts running, conversations that replayed.
The thing you should have said, the email you forgot to send, the person who looked at you a certain way and you're still not sure what it meant. And underneath all of it, a low current of unease you can't quite place, humming just below the surface, keeping you in a state that is somewhere between awake and asleep, but fully settled in neither. You might lie there for an hour, 2 hours, sometimes more. And in the morning, you wake up, if you slept at all, already tired. This is not a character flaw, and it is not clinical insomnia. This is cortisol. Cortisol is your brain's primary stress hormone. It's the chemical your hypothalamus releases when it perceives a threat, when it needs you alert, sharp, ready to respond. It raises your heart rate. It sharpens your senses. It temporarily suppresses processes the body considers non-essential, like digestion, like immune function, like deep sleep. Under normal conditions, cortisol follows a precise daily rhythm called the circadian cortisol curve. It peaks sharply in the first 30 minutes after waking, the cortisol awakening response, giving you the energy and alertness you need to meet the day. It gradually declines through the afternoon and drops steeply in the evening, allowing the body to shift into the parasympathetic state it needs for genuine rest. But when the brain has been under sustained stress, that rhythm breaks down. Cortisol levels stay elevated into the evening. The nervous system remains in a low-grade activated state. The brain, which has been running a quiet background alert all day, scanning for threats, managing pressures, holding it all together, refuses to stand down just because you closed your eyes. It doesn't believe it's safe to stop.
Because it has spent so long on guard that it has lost the capacity to recognize safety as real. And so you lie there, exhausted in your body, wired in your brain, unable to cross the distance between tired and asleep. If this is your experience, most nights or many nights, your nervous system is telling you something important. It has been working too hard for too long, and it no longer knows how to rest. Sign number 2. Small things trigger enormous reactions, and you feel ashamed afterward. Someone says something mildly critical in a meeting, and your heart pounds. Traffic makes you angrier than any traffic has a right to make a person. Your partner uses a tone you don't like, and something in you shuts down completely, or flares. And either way, the reaction feels too large for what actually happened. Afterward, almost immediately, the shame arrives. Why did I react like that? That was nothing. I used to be able to handle so much more. Here's what was actually happening inside your brain. There is a structure deep in the medial temporal lobe called the amygdala. It is small, roughly the size and shape of an almond, and it is your brain's primary threat detection and emotional alarm system. When the amygdala senses something it registers as dangerous or threatening, even mildly threatening, even ambiguously threatening, it sends an emergency signal throughout the brain. It bypasses the deliberate rational processes of the prefrontal cortex and triggers a physical and emotional response before you have had time to consciously evaluate what's happening. This is known as an amygdala hijacked, a term coined by psychologist Daniel Goleman, and it exists for an excellent evolutionary reason. In an emergency, you don't have time to think. You need your body to respond first. The problem is that under chronic stress, the amygdala becomes hypersensitized. Research using neuroimaging has shown that prolonged stress exposure causes the amygdala to grow denser and more reactive, its threat threshold lowering until it is firing at stimuli it would previously have ignored entirely. At the same time, chronic cortisol exposure impairs the prefrontal cortex, specifically the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which is the region responsible for regulating the amygdala's responses. The connection between the two weakens, the override becomes slow and unreliable. And so you are left with an alarm that is too sensitive and a brake that no longer works properly. Small things feel enormous because your brain's threat calibration is genuinely off. You are not overreacting in proportion to who you are. You are reacting proportionately to the state your nervous system is in. That is an important distinction. And the shame you feel afterward? That shame is not useful. It is adding weight to a system that is already carrying too much. Sign number 3. Your memory and concentration keep failing you. You walk into a room and forget why. You read the same paragraph 3 times and nothing sticks. You set something down in an obvious place and spend 20 minutes searching for it. You lose your train of thought mid-sentence. You know you used to be sharper than this. You can feel the difference. It frightens you slightly. What is happening? The answer involves the hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure located in the medial temporal lobe, one on each side of the brain. The hippocampus is the brain's primary memory formation system.
It takes incoming experiences and consolidates them into memories, converting the moment-to-moment flow of consciousness into something that can be stored and retrieved. It is also one of the most stress-sensitive regions in the entire human brain. When cortisol is chronically elevated, it damages the hippocampus in measurable, documentable ways. Cortisol interferes with neurogenesis, the formation of new neurons, in the hippocampus, one of the few areas of the adult brain where new neurons continue to be born throughout life. It damages existing hippocampal neurons and can sever their dendritic connections, the branches through which neurons communicate. Over time, with sustained exposure, the hippocampus physically shrinks. Multiple studies have found measurable volume reduction in the hippocampi of people who have experienced prolonged chronic stress. The effect is detectable on an MRI. A smaller, more damaged hippocampus is a less effective memory system. But memory is only part of the story. The prefrontal cortex, which manages sustained attention, working memory, planning, and the ability to hold multiple pieces of information in mind simultaneously, is also impaired by chronic stress. The neural circuits that support focused, deliberate cognition become less efficient. Your brain is not broken. It is not declining. It is overwhelmed. The cognitive machinery that handles clear thinking has been flooded with stress hormones for so long that it is genuinely struggling to perform at its previous level. This is not permanent, but it is a signal your brain is sending, clearly, repeatedly, in every room you walk into and every sentence you lose. Sign number 4, you are always waiting for something to go wrong. Things are okay right now.
But you can't feel that they are okay. There is a background hum, a low, persistent sense of unease that you've almost gotten used to, a feeling that the current peace is temporary, that you should be bracing for what's coming. Conversations go well. You replay them for the error you might have made. You receive good news. You wait for the catch. Someone is kind to you. Part of you waits for them to want something. You can't quite settle into good moments. You can't quite trust stillness. This is called hypervigilance, and it is one of the most common, least discussed manifestations of chronic stress. Here's why it happens. When the brain has been under threat, real, sustained, ongoing threat, it adapts. It reorganizes itself for an environment where danger is frequent. The amygdala's surveillance function becomes the dominant mode. The nervous system's default setting shifts from rest toward readiness. And when the external stressors ease, even temporarily, even significantly, the internal recalibration doesn't automatically follow. The system that was trained to stay alert stays alert. It keeps scanning, keeps checking, keeps running the quiet assessment of what could go wrong from here. This is not pessimism. This is not a negative personality trait. This is a nervous system that has learned, through direct, repeated experience, that threats are real and that not anticipating them has costs. It is trying to protect you. The tragedy is that the vigilance itself, the constant low-level scanning, is one of the things keeping the stress response active. You cannot relax because you feel unsafe, and part of you feel unsafe because you cannot relax. The loop runs itself.
Sign number 5, your body hurts in ways that have no clear medical explanation. Tension headaches that seem to come from nowhere. A jaw that is tight when you wake up. Not from grinding, or maybe from grinding, but either way you're waking up clenched. Shoulders that carry a tightness no amount of stretching fully resolves. A stomach that is unsettled more days than it should be. Nauseous at odd moments, unpredictably uncomfortable. Maybe recurring tension in the lower back. Maybe chest tightness that comes and goes. You've had these checked, or you've told yourself you will. They don't fit any obvious cause. They are not imaginary. They are the body's honest, faithful report of what the nervous system has been experiencing. Chronic stress activates the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, a complex hormonal communication system that, among its many functions, regulates inflammation throughout the body. When the HPA axis is chronically activated, systemic inflammation increases. Inflammation in muscle tissue produces pain. The muscles of the jaw, neck, and shoulders are among the first to express the accumulated tension of a stressed nervous system. They contract as part of the threat response, and when the threat never fully resolves, they never fully release. The gut offers perhaps the most compelling example of the body-mind connection under stress. Research over the past 2 decades has mapped a bidirectional communication network between the brain and the enteric nervous system, the gut's own neural network, called the gut-brain axis. When the brain is under sustained stress, it sends signals along this pathway that alter gut motility, change immune activity in the intestinal lining, and disrupt the balance of gut microbiota.
The gut responds by behaving anxiously, by moving too quickly or too slowly, by producing sensations of nausea, discomfort, bloating, because its communication partner, the brain, is anxious. Your body is not manufacturing symptoms. It is giving you an accurate readout of the state of the system it inhabits. Sign number 6, you've lost interest in the things you used to love. There are things you used to do that restored you: reading, cooking, playing music, walking somewhere with no particular purpose, watching something you genuinely enjoyed rather than just consuming to avoid the quiet. Somewhere along the way, those things stopped working. You try to do them and you feel flat, absent, going through the motions of an activity that used to carry meaning but no longer reaches you. You used to look forward to the weekend. Now it arrives and you feel nothing. You used to feel curious about new things. Now new things feel like effort. It would be easy and wrong to interpret this as depression or laziness. What it actually is, in many cases, is a disruption in the brain's dopamine system. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter most associated with motivation, anticipation, and the sense of reward. It is what makes things feel worthwhile. It is what drives you to reach toward an experience in anticipation of it being good. Under chronic stress, the dopaminergic pathways that connect the prefrontal cortex, the nucleus accumbens, and the ventral tegmental area, the brain's reward circuitry, become dysregulated. The reward system becomes blunted. It no longer responds with the intensity it previously had to activities that aren't surviving-related. This is not random. It is an adaptation.
In a brain that believes it is living in a state of ongoing threat, the resources directed toward pleasure and exploration are considered non-essential. The brain is allocating everything toward vigilance, threat management, and basic function. There isn't enough left for joy. Your love of the things you love is not gone, but your brain has been operating in a mode where those things are no longer receiving the neurochemical support they need to feel like they matter. This is reversible, but it requires understanding what happened, not concluding that you have simply become someone who doesn't care anymore. Sign number 7. You feel like you're watching your life from outside. You are in a conversation, present in body, visible to others, but you are not quite there. You look at your own life, your relationships, your home, your routines, and you feel a strange, quiet distance from all of it, like you are watching yourself from slightly above and behind, like everything is happening to a version of you that you can observe but not fully inhabit. This experience has a clinical name, depersonalization, and in milder forms, it is far more common under chronic stress than most people realize. When the brain is overwhelmed by sustained threat, one of its protective responses is to modulate the intensity of emotional engagement with the present moment. The insula, a region buried within the lateral sulcus of the cortex, responsible for interoception, for the felt sense of being in your own body, for emotional integration, becomes less active. The anterior cingulate cortex, which normally integrates cognition and emotion and contributes to the unified sense of self in the moment, becomes dysregulated. And the prefrontal cortex, which constructs narrative continuity, the ongoing story of who you are and what your life means, is impaired. The combined effect is a reduction in the fullness of being present. The brain steps back. It mutes the experience. Not because anything has permanently changed in who you are, but because the system that connects your intellectual awareness of your life to your emotional experience of it has been disrupted. You know you have a life. You just can't feel it right now. This is frightening when you don't know what's causing it. It is less frightening when you understand that it is a protective response of an overloaded nervous system, not a sign that something is permanently wrong with your relationship to yourself. Sign number 8. You are always exhausted, but you cannot genuinely rest. This is one of the cruelest features of chronic stress. You need sleep, you need stillness. Your body is asking loudly and constantly for recovery. And when you try to give it what it's asking for, you can't. You sit down and your mind fills with what you're not doing. You lie in bed and the guilt starts. You try to take a break and your body stays tense, your thoughts keep moving, and after 20 minutes of technically resting, you feel no better than before. Rest is not the same as inactivity. Genuine physiological rest, the kind that actually repairs, requires the nervous system to shift from sympathetic activation to parasympathetic activation, from the state that mobilizes resources for threat to the state that allocates resources for recovery. This transition is regulated by a complex interaction between the brainstem, the vagus nerve, and the higher cortical areas involved in safety assessment. Under chronic stress, the sympathetic state has become the default. The nervous system has normalized high activation. And the signals that would ordinarily trigger the shift into rest, the absence of threat, the experience of safety, the relaxation of muscular tension,
are no longer being generated automatically. The nervous system has essentially forgotten how to switch lanes. And so you rest without resting. You sleep without sleeping deeply. You take breaks that don't break anything. And the exhaustion compounds. You need rest to recover from the stress, and the stress is preventing the rest that would allow recovery. This loop can run for months or years before it is interrupted. You are not failing at rest. You are caught in a physiological feedback cycle. And recognizing it for what it is, that recognition itself is the first interruption. Sign number 9. You overreact, and the shame that follows is worse than the reaction itself. Something happens. Something that, in another moment, on another day, you would have handled. But in this moment, on this day, you don't handle it. You raise your voice, or you shut down, or you say the cutting thing you can feel yourself saying even as you're saying it and wishing you weren't. And then, almost immediately, it's over, and the shame arrives. You were too much. You couldn't keep it together. You hurt someone because you couldn't control yourself. What I want to tell you about this moment, this specific, painful, recurring moment, is that the overreaction is not the problem. The overreaction is the symptom.
Every nervous system has what researchers call a window of tolerance, a range of activation within which the brain can respond to challenge in a thoughtful, flexible, proportionate way. Inside that window, you have access to your full self. You can think clearly. You can regulate your emotions. You can choose your response rather than simply emit it. But every window has edges. And when you cross those edges, when the level of activation in your nervous system exceeds what your system can manage, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. The part of you that holds your values, your self-awareness, your ability to think before you speak, it is temporarily unavailable. What takes over is older, faster, less nuanced. It is not who you are at your best. It is who your nervous system is in an emergency. Under chronic stress, the baseline level of activation in your nervous system rises, which means the edges of your window of tolerance are closer than they used to be. It takes less to push you past them, not because you have become a worse person, but because your system is running too hot. The overreaction is your nervous system reporting the truth about its own state. The shame is you punishing yourself for a report you didn't choose to make. You deserve better than that. Sign 10, and this is the one I want you to sit with most carefully. You don't feel like yourself anymore. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that you would necessarily put into those words if someone asked you directly. Just something is different. The version of you that existed a few years ago, or a few seasons ago, or maybe even just before this particular stretch of sustained difficulty, that version was lighter, more open, more genuinely present with people.
More able to laugh at things, more curious about ideas, more able to sit in a moment without scanning the horizon. You miss that person, but you don't quite know how to name what happened to them. Here is what I want you to know. What you are describing has a neurological basis. The prefrontal cortex is not just the brain's logical reasoning center. It is also the region most closely associated with personality, with the nuanced expression of individual values, with the capacity for warmth and humor and genuine connection and creative thought. It is, in many real senses, the neural home of who you are at your most fully yourself. It is also the region of the brain most vulnerable to prolonged cortisol exposure. When cortisol floods the prefrontal cortex over months and years, the gray matter in this region can measurably thin. The dendritic connections, the branches through which neurons communicate, can retract. The access you have to your own depth, your own richness, your own presence, your own humor, your own capacity for wonder becomes restricted. Not because you have changed in any fundamental way, but because the neural infrastructure that allows you to express who you are has been compromised. It is like having a beautiful instrument and playing it with one hand. You are still there. The music is still in you, but the mechanism that allows it to come out fully has been damaged by something that wasn't your fault. Here is the part that matters most. The brain is not a static organ. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to change its own structure in response to new conditions, means that what stress has changed, the right conditions can change back.
Studies have found that the hippocampus can regenerate neurons after stress is reduced. The prefrontal cortex can restore connections. The amygdala can be recalibrated. The window of tolerance can widen again. The person you feel like you've lost is not gone. They are waiting. Waiting for the conditions, the safety, the support, the understanding, the rest that allow the brain to rebuild what stress has worn down. And the very first condition is this one: knowing what happened. Understanding why you feel the way you feel. Because a brain that has been told the truth about its own experience, that has finally had its suffering named and validated and explained, is a brain that can begin to come back. So before you go, I have one question for you. Which of these 10 signs felt most like you? You don't need to answer that to anyone, but I want you to say it to yourself, quietly, honestly, not as a diagnosis, not as a label you're assigning yourself forever, just as the truth of what you're carrying right now. Because naming it, as we talked about in our last video, is the first thing your nervous system needs. Not more effort, not more pushing through. Just, I see you, I know what's happening, and I'm paying attention now. Tell me in the comments which sign resonated with you the most. I read every single one. And if this video helped you recognize something today that you needed to recognize, please share it with someone who is telling themselves they're fine. Someone who is tired in that specific way that sleep doesn't fix. Someone who has forgotten a little bit who they are. They deserve to know they're not alone, and they deserve to know why.
Subscribe to Human Mind for more videos that take the science of who you are and turn it into something you can actually use. I'll see you in the next one.